community now. Isn't that amazing? They've been going for 3 years and it's just the community. And it started when their service station was about to close and the community bought the service station. And from there, now they're supporting their community with power. So you can see that the shed at the back has got the solar panels on it, and the battery is there. And that's not community land, but there's just the people in the community have donated that land with all of that stuff. They've got a microgrid, and it's a chance to speak out microgrids today. Sorry, we're going to get started because I know you've all got lots and lots of questions. Thanks. Okay. Thanks. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the area in which we live, the Bennelong electorate, is on the land of the Wanamadak, or people of the Darug Nation, the traditional owners of this land. We and I acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who now reside within the area, and we pay our respects to the ancestors, elders past, present and emerging. We respect their heritage and acknowledge and uphold their intrinsic connection and continuing relationships to country. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders belong to the oldest continuous living culture in the world, and their sovereignty over their lands was never ceded. Okay. I'm going to pass you over to Paula, and Paula is going to talk to you about the voices of the people.
Hi everyone, I'm Paula Brody and I'm a member of Voices of Bennelong. Just really briefly, Voices of Bennelong is an independent community organisation made up of residents of the federal electorate of Bennelong. We were formed in 2021 with a vision for a political system which is fair, open, participatory and accountable for all Australians. We want our elected representatives to reflect the values and concerns of their communities, and government decision-making to be balanced, transparent and evidence-based, with people and the planet at the heart of every government decision. We know from our research that climate action and integrity are front and centre of our community's thoughts, and we are working to keep these issues a key focus for our government representatives, keeping our government accountable, ensuring they uphold their promises to the constituents of Bennelong. So, as a result, I say thank you to Jerome for coming along and participating in this really important discussion. I'm going to hand over to Michelle, who's going to give you a little snapshot about Bennelong Climate Action Group.
Okay, so my name is Michelle Rawson and I'm one of the founders of Bennelong Climate Action Group. Tonight I want to talk briefly about last week. Last week a climate report was released by some of the world's leading climate scientists, warning us that we had reached a bleak moment in the climate crisis and that we were very close to irreversible changes. The time was running out, that emissions must halve by 2030 to limit warming, but instead of falling, they're still rising around the world. Last week, all three of the key UN agencies produced damning reports. The UN Environmental Agency found that world leaders still had no credible pathway to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, that in fact limiting warming to 1.5 degrees was no longer believed even possible. Last week, an International Energy Agency report found that the net income for the world oil and gas producers is set to double in 2022 to an unprecedented $4 trillion. A huge $2 trillion windfall, a sum that could otherwise transform climate action if we indeed held a highly profitable industry to account for the damage that they have knowingly done. Last week, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that we are headed for a global catastrophe and for economy-destroying levels of global heating, that we need climate action on all fronts, and that we need it now. Last week in Australia, these reports barely made the news. That's despite what else was happening last week in Australia when we had unprecedented flooding across 4 states, from as high up as mid-east Queensland to as far south as Tasmania. This comes on the back of unprecedented droughts, fires, storms, COVID, and the floods over the past few years. In a recent report released by the Climate Council and verified by the Australian Insurance Council, 1 in 25 homes will be uninsurable by 2030 due to increasing natural disasters. Suburbs like North Epping, surrounded by bushland, can expect to see insurance premiums go through the roof or find no insurance company will underwrite a policy to insure them at all. This is already happening in bushfire zones across the nation. You just need to walk out the door now to experience the climate crisis in action, or drive south to the snowy mountains to see snow gums dying at an alarming rate, an ecosystem in collapse. The extinction crisis of our mammals and birds, the decline of the reef. The climate crisis can feel overwhelming because it is overwhelming. What's happening is really bad. It's easy to stick our heads in the sand, to deny, to ridicule, to fill every moment of every day with insignificant things as the places we love collapse around us, to become depressed by the enormity of the problem, to be paralysed into inaction. Yet act is what we need to do. It is through acting that hope is created. Hope doesn't just magically appear. Without people standing up and taking action, nothing will change. If we each ask ourselves what more can we do, whether it's reducing our own household emissions, joining a group, planting trees, meeting with your MP and lobbying for stronger action. Jerome is a pretty approachable guy, I'm sure he will listen. Turning up, standing up, attending protests, writing letters, using your power to vote, there's a state election coming up, using your voice by having conversations with friends, with neighbours, with family, so many things. And what if we each then asked ourselves what we could do, not just as an individual, but as a community? And that brings us to why we're here tonight. A community battery for North Epping, done right, offers a chance to not just reduce energy bills, but to reduce emissions. It was one of the actions that Bennelong Climate Action Group was looking at prior to the election, and one that we're excited to learn more about tonight, because it's time for action, both on an individual and collective basis. And as a community, we can achieve so much together. In the new year, Bennelong Climate Action Group will be holding events. Already lined up is an energy audit workshop with Energy Guru Adam Corrigan. Find out how you can easily reduce your energy bills and your emissions in the process, how to pick the low-lying fruit. Another event we're looking at is inviting author of Electrifying Everything, Saul Griffith, to speak about not only the benefits of electrifying your home, but how together we can become an electrified community. The good news is that having a community battery will help. We hope that you will support these initiatives and get behind them. And if you have any other ideas about how, as a community or an individual, we can reduce emissions, please speak to us or join our Facebook group. We'd love to hear from you, and we would love to have you on board. Thank you for coming tonight. The more of us, the better. Thank you.
Thank
You can see the emotion there, can't you? I think she holds it for all of us, certainly for me anyway. So on we go, and we'll get intro to Dusan. So over to you, Dusan, and Dusan is our expert on the microgrid, which is what will power the community battery, I believe. Is that right?
Oh, possible. Why not? If I start, you will see. Well, thank you very much to everyone for having me tonight and having this opportunity to present to everyone. I hope you endure my accent. Whenever I sort of go overseas, I have some sort of US colleagues, and they, especially people who don't know me, they say, are you Australian? How did you know? I go back to my Australian friends and they say, yeah, no, mate, you don't have Australian accent. So that's, so my international English has Australian. Yeah, thank you. First, sort of legal disclaimer, I work for a company who deals with microgrids. The opinions that I will sort of express tonight are not opinions of my company, but my own. I am an engineer, and I'll be just a technical voice for this sort of community battery event tonight. Just straight off the bat, I think this is a great project. Just to sort of conclude up front, I can see a lot of benefits, how it can go and become very good, and how the community and a wider community could have a lot of good benefits. I have to think very hard how this can go wrong. Obviously, it can go wrong if its implementation of it goes very wrong, but if sort of the project is run right, this is sort of like a win or neutral project in the long run. So I guess let's just sort of push it to be a win or even a win plus for the community. It's very often sort of I can debate different projects and different things. Sometimes some projects are very sort of on the knife edge, and you have to fight for them to prove or to at least show their positive sides. Community batteries are what they say a no-brainer. They are basically the future. Just like what we would love to have our own little garden, we would love to have our own little farmer's market. That's what a battery is. We have solar, for example, or small wind turbines that are in our backyard. They are growing our local food or local electricity and selling it sort of on the local farmer's market. It's the food with the lowest mileage, with the lowest sort of carbon. That's what the community battery is. It has the opportunity essentially to capture the energy which is generated by the community and sort of store it locally for the times of need. It's always, as an engineer, it's always very good to sort of mention the top priority, that is safety. So are they safe? Are they safe for us, for our children? I'm a father of one, hoping to become a father of two soon. But to our children, to our properties. Again, this comes down to implementation. Generally, batteries are safe. We have batteries in our homes pretty much everywhere where we look. We have batteries nowadays in our garages, which are Tesla wall batteries and similar. We have batteries in our cars nowadays. I don't have either of the two, but it is also going to be the future. I believe that the community battery, which is properly built and built somewhere close to the substation, something like that, or even in a substation close to the transformers, properly fenced off. Sometimes those transformers even have sort of walls on the side. When they burn, all the smoke and heat goes out, so they don't destroy any property. And I believe that is the way, that is the sort of proper way to, or they're contained just like this, so they don't pose any damage to local communities. What is the risk of them exploding and really bringing any damage? It's very low. It's very low. Look at the car. This is going to be maintained, hopefully, by professionals. Sometimes cars are not very often maintained by professionals. Still, not every electric car burns, or even the diesel car, which also actually has a lot more energy in it to burn. So I believe that, generally speaking, community batteries are going to be a safer thing than every one of us having one of those little batteries in our homes. So what is sort of the best outcome? The best outcome is for It depends on who are we talking about. Because there are multiple, there's many players in this project. There is the player of the local community, there is the local utility, there is the government, there is the wider community who's going to benefit from this project. Direct, and there are also direct and indirect benefits. For example, direct benefits for the local community would be, just like Michelle said, increased renewable energy locally. It depends on how the project is structured then, on whether the prices could also be held and sort of not escalated in the future. That really comes down to the sort of commercial aspects of the project. Stability of the local grid is also important. The most expensive electricity is the one that we don't have, and that is like blackouts, and that is the community battery sort of helps us bridge that as well. There are some sort of indirect benefits of community batteries. One indirect benefit of a community battery is, well, it is going to support the local utility, which in turn is going to provide us with a more stable and reliable power supply. I would love to sort of just for a moment stop on the regulation, which I believe would be a star winner of this project. The current regulation that we have, the electricity market here in Australia, it's a good regulation, but it was made 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, I had a flip phone. There was no sort of solar. There was no batteries, and that regulation is still there. I think that what this project has the potential is to change that regulation for it in the future to support more of these batteries. And I think that this is a brilliant chance, because if we miss this opportunity, this federal project will just be a project that paid for 400 batteries across Australia. It has the opportunity of being the project that started the fire of all community batteries just sort of rolling out across all of Australia, and everything the government did was just sort of light the match with the first 400. Again, this is a project that just makes sense. I just love, as an engineer, I love when things just make sense, and this absolutely makes sense. And if played properly, it would definitely be one of those projects which showed how the community battery works for all the players in the game, and how it can be just scaled up. So, who benefits from the community? I'm not going to talk for very long, because what I'm really interested in are the questions and answering the questions directly.
And we're going to have a question and answer later after Jerome's had his.
I'm going to run for a few more minutes.
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
So who benefits from this is sort of definitely who can potentially benefit from it. As I said, local community, utility, and wider community. Local community can benefit from, as I mentioned, lower prices, higher reliability. Utility can benefit from having another asset there which serves their purpose, and postpones capital expenditure in the local grid. What does that mean? That just means that they can push out some of the monies into the future, keeping the prices where they are for longer, not escalating them, or even reducing them in the short run. An interesting project was done some 5-6 years ago in Victoria, where a local utility had this very long distribution feeder, and what they had to do was to supply the community at the end of that feeder. As the community was growing, they had to increase the size of the conductors. It was running for 10-20 kilometers. It was a monumental project. It was a big project. And what they actually figured out was, well, actually community consumes most of its energy when everyone comes back home, so from 5 to 7 p.m. So what they did instead of upgrading this entire line, what they did was put the battery at the end. And then that battery supplied just that surplus of energy for 2 hours. Small battery versus this incredible investment for the whole distribution line. Obviously, the community benefited from at least having those same rates, electricity sort of distribution rates maintained on their bills for a longer period of time. Our bills basically consist of 3 components. We buy energy from the generators on the market. They have approximately their third of electricity that we pay. Then there is the portion that we pay to the transmission and distribution utilities to bring the electrons from the big power plant somewhere out there to us. And number 3 is the retailers who sell us that electricity and maintain the service to us. So if we keep investing constantly in this infrastructure, especially the distribution lines, we can build huge wind farms. We can build a solar farm back on Earth. It's a brilliant sort of solar resource back there, but someone needs to bring that electricity over here. So what's going to happen? It might be very cheap electricity to generate, but it will be very expensive one to bring it here. So what a battery in this example would essentially do is maintain that portion for the distribution and transmission part of our bill. Keep it where it is, don't let it escalate. It definitely, community battery is definitely anti-gold plating, as it was all of the sort of fuss in about 5-6 years ago, when everyone's talking about gold plating in the electricity industry. How can it work from our perspective? Physically, one thing is sort of defining physical parameters. This is what the laws of physics will tell us how we can run a battery, and the other one is sort of how then we put our battery to work, or what is the economic model how we actually do run our battery. The physics sort of give us the sandpit, and where we decide to play in that sandpit, it's down to all of the players in the game, in this project. So what physically this battery can do, I'm a consumer of electric energy as well. I would be first I would love to know, I guess top 2 questions that come to my mind is, how's this going to impact my bills? And how is this going to positively contribute to the community through both sort of renewable energy and essentially helping out the community members in my vicinity. So it positively benefits both. It positively benefits both. The first one is, I don't think that anyone can promise cheap energy for everyone. But what projects like this can do is hold the prices for longer. So hold the prices at this level. Don't let them escalate, because especially in today's climate, what we're seeing with the inflation and the prices of everything going up, essentially if we have, that's why renewable energy is brilliant. It doesn't depend on the fossil fuels whose prices go up. If we have the renewable energy, if we have the batteries to store that renewable energy, that means that we can hold the prices down regardless of what the inflation and the economy is doing. We can fix one of the big variables in our life. That's how it's seen from the community's perspective. It can sort of help us with the prices of energy. It can help us with our solar, which is now sometimes even being curtailed by the utility. Sometimes utility is not built essentially to manage these two-way flows of energy. The utility was built to essentially deliver the energy from the big, it's a one-way, to deliver the energy from the big power stations to all of us consumers. And what's now happening, these bi-directional flows in the network are sort of setting all of them scratching their heads and trying to figure out what they're going to do. Community batteries do help that, because they sort of limit those two-way flows within the community so that my neighbor can benefit from my solar surplus just because I'm not at home, so I have a surplus of energy, and my neighbor happens to be washing his clothes at the same time. As I said, this project can also go the other way, where a community doesn't see the benefits of it, where utility sees all of the benefits for it. So utility can say, well, great, this is another asset to help us improve our grid, postpone our capexes, just run it as a sort of local asset which will help the voltage profiles and frequency regulation, all of those buzzwords. They can do that. And I think that if we go either one way, if only the community, local community sees the benefits, or only the utility sees the benefits, it's going to be a lose-lose scenario. I think that the projects like this can only benefit from both players seeing a benefit from this community energy storage. It has to be a win-win scenario. So, just to wrap it up.
Yeah,
We should have said something earlier.
I've got lots of questions, but we'll get to those.
I like for usual news, that's good.
Keep it going.
So, just to wrap it up, one day we're going to be at the end of this project, and we can say, well, this was how great of a project this was, because it brought additional stability to the grid, to the local community. There were a couple of outages around us, and we didn't have them. There's an increased renewable energy contribution in this community, because now a lot more solar was allowed to be installed in the community, and that surplus of solar is now being stored in the battery where it can later be used. Thirdly, from the local community's perspective, the pricing has been maintained. From the utilities perspective, and I would love to see the utility benefiting from this as well, they could say, well, this battery really helped us because 99% of the time we don't need it. The community is using it. But that 1%, it helped us prevent a blackout. It helped us prevent a cloggages in some other part of the network. This community helped other communities. And finally, for a wider Australian community, I think that this is going to be a brilliant showcase. If run properly and if done properly, this will be shown how a community battery can work for all of the players. There we go.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
After having been in Yakandanda recently, it brings to mind,
So that was saying the community hall has got, the community hall has got its own battery. And so on really hot days, the community can go there and cool out. Especially if the power goes out around the place, yeah. So there's that benefit as well. I should have said this beforehand. Excuse me, I'll just get it back up again. I wanted to have a lot of songs tonight that around sun. There's the sunshine. And the Beatles song, yeah. Okay, so thanks for sharing. You've made a big trek here tonight. I don't know where you come from, but you have. Thank you. And you've got a master's degree in electrical and power engineering from the University of Belgrade, a doctorate of philosophy from the University of Tasmania, specialising in the reliability of power systems with high renewable penetration. Yeah.
so I know our community trust here, our Brains Trust here has got lots of information, but I think you might top us on that.
Yeah, thank you. His many years experience in renewable energy, including positions as a senior electrical engineer, a technical director, microgrid engineering consultant, and his current position is vice president of engineering at Internet Global, whose company mission is to drive global adaptation of clean energy. Apart from that, he's a great guy. Yep. You've got a great accent. I love your accent. And
The beer helped, yeah.
And what?
The beer helped.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think that's it. So over to you, Jerome, and then after that we're going to have a Q&A with Michelle and I. So it'll be Jerome's questions and a question from the audience. So hold those thoughts.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Nishan, for that. That was fantastic. Michelle and Paula too, thanks for having me tonight. I'd first like to start by also acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and paying respects to elders past, present and emerging, and just say how proud I am to be part of a government that's committed to enshrining the Uluru Statement from the Heart and enshrining constitutional recognition of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. I use every opportunity I can to put two questions to you. Coming soon, probably in the latter half of 2023, we'll have a referendum. And there aren't many referendums in Australia that are successful. We've only had 8 out of 44. And in a seat like Bennelong, I hope we're one of the electorates that overwhelmingly votes yes, and that we can make it 9 out of 45. And I'll put two questions to you, as no doubt more information will come out about this proposal in the new year, and our office will be working with the community to encourage people to vote yes. As you're walking into the ballot box to vote in this referendum, do you believe that our history started in 1788, or did it start 60,000 years ago with the oldest continuous civilization on Earth? And do you think, given our government's and our nation's history on the treatment of Indigenous people here in Australia, do you think that as a sign of reconciliation we should give them a say and consult with them on laws that directly impact them? If you answer those questions as I would hope that you would vote yes when the referendum comes around, which, as I said earlier, is probably towards the end of 2023. Should be very interesting to see how we go. Okay, thank you to North Epping for coming out tonight and for your support at the federal election in May 2021. It's very, maybe not everyone here voted for me, but I know that just enough in Bennelong did. And thank you to those who did. It's not too often that Bennelong goes this way, and my job over the next 3 years will be to be a very active local member, approachable, as Michelle said, and to consult with our community on issues that matter. And it's very clear to a community like North Epping, climate change is top of the list, of one of the top issues on the list. Integrity also another one. Very proud to have already voted on emissions reduction target in Parliament. Most recently also spoke on our offshore wind legislation, and I was over the moon when our election commitment to install a community battery in North Epping was funded in the budget held only 6 or 7 days ago. The program is for a $200 the program's for a $200 million investment which will install 400 community batteries across the nation. About a third of those have been already identified by location through election commitments. The remainder will be done through consultation, I guess bids from community groups just like this one. I'm hopeful that with the hopeful success of our North Epping Community Battery, that we'll be in a position to bid for another community battery to be installed in Bennelong, but that process is to continue, and I'm happy to go into more detail on that if there's any questions. The grants will be administered by the Business Hub, which is run by the government there for the ones that were committed during the election, and ARENA, which is the Renewable Energy Authority. They'll run the process for the remainder of the batteries. That'll be an open process. It'll be run by the government, run by ARENA, and communities can put in their expressions of interest for a battery within their electorate and with their region. For those who don't know about me, I've been in public life for about 10 years. I started in the council in the City of Ryde and had the honour of serving as Mayor of the City of Ryde for 5 years. And very early on in my time there on council, literally just across Terry's Creek. My first home in Bennelong was in Marsfield, just on Crimea Road. I learned very early on that our community here in Ryde and Bennelong had a strong commitment to environmental action and wanting to reduce emissions. Our natural environment here is beautiful and our community want to protect it. And on the council when I first served, I was seeing that the elected arm weren't in line with what the community expectations were, particularly on the protection of our biodiversity corridors here, on those little pocket habitats that we've got, and particularly on environmental things. So when I had the pleasure of becoming mayor in 2017 and having a left-leaning council, we were very much able to implement a lot of those things that our community have been asking for. We had a target of being 100% renewable energy by 2030. We're able to do that this year in 2022. We have a net zero target by 2030 in the city of Ryde. We've installed electric chargers throughout the municipality. We've helped communities install solar, and we're rewriting our development control plan to enable more solar in apartments in particular. When the now Prime Minister rang me to run for Bennelong, I told him straight up front that climate would be very much part of what I want to help achieve in government, and it's almost a weekly obsession of mine. Whenever we're down in Parliament, I seek to meet with like-minded MPs within the Labor caucus to encourage the government to go further when it comes to action on climate change. And these community batteries are just the start. Essentially, they operate to store excess solar that your home produces. I just looked at my app before. I've got solar at home, and we exported 15.6 kilowatt hours today. That would then be stored in the local community battery for use by those who sign up to the program at night. If there's excess storage that's not used, I'm advised that those who don't have solar panels who sign up to the community battery program can also have access to use that renewable energy. This will reduce power bills, it'll reduce emissions, and it'll increase the uptake of renewable energy for 100,000 households across Australia. And each battery can support about 250 homes signed up as part of the program. The process of identifying locations, designing the grants scheme, and installing them starts now. I mean, technically as of 6 days ago, but let's give our public service a little bit of slack. It'll start. If it hasn't already started, it's starting now. And for the places that are identified, that means there'll be discussions with local council to help identify a location for the battery to be installed. There's often local government that owns the most land in areas like this. And as you can see by that other green one behind, which was an Ausgrid, they're about the size of a small four-wheel drive, usually installed as close to the substation as possible, usually on a little concrete slab, enclosed. Ausgrid is the main transmission provider around here, so it'd be in partnership with them. So once a piece of land is identified, the council will then likely consult with the community as to that location. I've reached out to the Mayor of Parramatta, knowing that North Epping is split in two, and I've reached out to the General Manager of Hornsby as well, just to flag, put it on their radar that someone from Arena or the Business Grant Hub will be in touch with them to help identify a location, and then obviously consultation with the community on the location as well. Once it's installed, the local transmission provider here is Ausgrid. They'll work with the retailers to provide a mechanism for households to sign up. It's usually, according to the Minister, it's usually $1 or $2 a month. And that gives you access to the battery and to have the software to be able to see how it goes, see how much you put in, see how much is left, And as I said at the top, what is the best about this community battery, and what Dusan said earlier, is that it can also help others in the community who may not have the ability to install solar at their place, or because they rent, or because they're in apartments. So those who don't have access to that technology will be able to access any excess power that is stored in the battery. Savings, I'll just ask some of your questions preemptively. You mentioned the cost. So Ausgrid have modelled their battery trial that you saw up there. Savings are between $50 to $250 per year for a user, and that depends on how the battery is used. If it's completely for community use, you probably get to the top end, but if at times it's needed to help smooth out load, or to help the network, then it may be less than that. It also depends on whether the community battery is spec towards reducing emissions, or whether it's spec towards reducing power, and there might be slight variations there, but they say anywhere between $50 and $250. Its intent is to reduce our reliability on fossil fuels, and to encourage more and more people to install renewable energy in their homes. The economies of scale of having a community battery are significant. Instead of us each individually installing a battery at home, we have a battery in the community that can serve 250 households. This is one of a suite of measures that this government funded in the budget. You would have heard perhaps about huge investments in transmission. You can't reduce emissions without transmission, so a huge part of the government's clean energy agenda is to ensure that we can generate power via renewable energy and transmit it to where it's used. A huge project that was announced in Tasmania was the Marinus Link, billions of dollars for an underground sea cable to go from Tasmania to Victoria. Tasmania already operate at 100% renewable energy. They have capacity with minimal investment to generate 200% renewable energy, but they don't have any cables to get it to the mainland. The Marinus cable, which has been talked about for decades, is now funded because we have a Labor government, and that was one of our main commitments, $15 billion to fund transmission upgrades so that we can import renewable energy to where it's used. This will also be used to help transfer power from the regions where we intend to install 85 solar banks, where there are huge solar banks out in the regions where power is currently produced. We'll transition away from fossil fuel power generation to wind and solar, and use the upgraded transmission to bring it into the cities where power is used the most. Really proud to be part of this government that's hopefully entered the climate wars. My role within it will be to ensure that, and to push really hard that we go further. One of the biggest and least talked about things as part of the emissions reduction target and legislation was the re-establishment of the Independent Climate Authority. They will annually the Minister will annually report to Parliament on our progress on meeting that 43%, and they'll be tasked with providing us with targets that we must reach to deal with the climate crisis. In this term of Parliament, they'll be giving us advice on a new target for 2035. I'm hopeful and confident that that target will be higher than the current target that's legislated, and then that'll enable us to have a conversation with our community to ensure that we do more on climate change, just as we're able to do at the local level. I don't see why we can't do it at any other level. So that'll be my job within the Labor caucus, but also to pass on North Epping's views, and to pass on West Ryde and Carlingford and everyone in this area. Climate change is high on the agenda, so that'll be my job, and I'm hopeful that I'm one of many Labor MPs within the government who want to see our government do more. To do more, we need to seek a mandate, and I'm hopeful that at the next election we'll be seeking a mandate to go further on climate change and emissions reduction. This is a good first step, and I'm hopeful that we can get these batteries in our community as soon as possible so that we can tell the rest of Sydney and the rest of Bennelong how successful they are, and that we'll start, lobbying the government to get more around here.
When the sun's shining.
The sun's shining. I'm happy to take questions. I know I don't want to stand here speaking all evening, so I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thanks for having me.
I think Jerome, you're just happy to take them from the floor and not the list, or do you just,
We have the
If you
president
come
here.
and answer them, Dusan might have to give knowledge,
I'm in your hands, Michelle.
Okay, ask away. Here's one, Joe.
So we've got a tool here on the phone. We want to use it. Okay.
How about we swap mine?
We'll use that one.
So there are the questions that we put up.
Yes, I have. Do you want to ask those as a start?
Oh, we'll get started.
Right.
So why was North Epping chosen? I just thought we'd get started. Well, you're next.
I'd just like to ask you, where will these batteries be manufactured? Where will they come from?
Well, unfortunately, because we don't have a local manufacturing industry here, they're likely to come, yes, that's right, I'll get to that. They're likely to come from overseas. Lots of batteries are made in Korea, China, and I know the battery in my car is made in China. But hopefully, within the term of this government, we start establishing some local manufacturing. One of our biggest promise is a $15 billion fund to increase our sovereign manufacturing capability through a number of sectors. We're very good at digging stuff up out of the ground and sending it overseas without processing and manufacturing it first. And this government, and we saw through COVID, that left us and our supply chains in enormous stress. So I know in central Queensland, the government have invested millions of dollars into advanced manufacturing capabilities, in particular for those minerals that go into batteries. We mine every mineral that goes into a solar panel, but we do not make them here. So we need to fix that. That'll be a 10-year process, I would imagine, maybe sooner, but we're hopeful that not only can we build solar panels here, that we can build batteries here, and we can build cars here too.
Well, I don't want to pour cold water on you, but our record for maintaining manufacturing ability is abysmal, and we can't make motor cars here. The last decent thing we made here eventually was a Collins class submarine. All the experts.
Hang on a minute, hang on. Can everybody hear the questions and the statements being made by Mr.
The statement, look, I agree with you, sir.
If you can't hear, put your hand up. Otherwise, I'll ask you to stand up and just repeat what you're saying.
The former government had a shocking record on manufacturing. I think they chased GM out of South Australia. Remember Joe Hockey's words. So yeah, they've got a lot of catching up to do. There's been 10 years wasted in particularly renewables, and I think we've hit the ground running, but there's plenty to do.
Okay, another question.
Just firstly, a comment. You said a battery like this will be able to be used by about 250 households, and there are 5,000 homes in North Epping, so it's only about 5% of the community that will get direct benefit at the moment. So I hope this is something that will expand. But I wanted clarification. You said that some of these batteries have already been allocated to communities and some will get to be, that's the case. Now, from what I understood, this was an election promise for North Epping, so are we already on the list?
Yes.
We are.
What for 250 households? Or
For one community battery.
For one community battery.
not
Which
for
is
the whole of North Epping?
no, for one community battery in North Epping. So 58 have been for specific locations were put out through the election campaign, as mine was. I said, if we're elected, we'll build a community battery in North Epping. That's $29 million of the 200 million. The remaining 171 million will be administered through ARENA, which is the Renewable Energy
This
Agency.
definitely means North Epping will get one.
Yes.
That's
For
right.
250
Yes.
households.
Who will own
So it's owned by the electricity transmission, it's an asset for them. There'll be an agreement with the Commonwealth and the provider on how it's calibrated, and that's what Dusan was talking about earlier. It needs to be for community benefit. It'll be owned and maintained by, in this instance, Ausgrid and Ausgrid. They do the energy provision here under license from the Commonwealth, and there'll be no doubts in terms and conditions that the Commonwealth will place, so that at the majority of time, as you said, 99% of the time, it's used for community benefit, and then when required, they may be able to use it to ease the load so that we don't get blackouts in the
And how soon do you think it will be that the community is given the opportunity to participate?
Yeah, so it was funded last week. We'll start the process. The grant funding mechanism for the remaining 171 million is being designed right now. The Commonwealth will reach out to the local councils and start the process. Having spent 10 years in local government, if the local community don't support that, we may have an issue. Like, just say council and the Commonwealth identify a location, but that's opposed for whatever reason, there may be an issue there. That's why I rang both Hornsby and Parramatta, just in case. It's on the peninsula there. So I rang both of them, and we've sort of getting them ready. North Epping is where it is. They are, as you saw, the size of a four-wheel drive. I'm hopeful the community gets behind it. I suggested North Epping as a site because I know this is a community that cares about renewable energy. I know it's a community that has high solar uptake and low battery penetration. So it makes sense to install one here. If the community get behind it and support the proposed location when it's identified by the Commonwealth, Ausgrid and the local council, then your main roadblocks out of the way, and then it can be installed. I'm hopeful that in the next calendar year it'll be installed, but there'll be further announcements in how the grants are being listed, how it's rolled out. My staff are here, and there are some clipboards which will get passed around now if they haven't been already. Please put one on each table. You put your contact details on there. We'll be more than happy to email out updates as they come to hand. None of this work could be done prior to last week because it wasn't funded. So now that it's been funded, the public service can start their process. There'll have to be arrangements with Ausgrid, there'll have to be arrangements with the council. That'll all have to be supported, particularly the council stuff will have to be supported by the community through whatever process they choose to take up in regards to the use of council land, and then once that's all approved and everyone's happy, we'll then go to the process of installing it.
As Jerome mentioned, the battery has to be associated with the transformer. The map up there shows you the transformers around North Epping that I could find. The red ones are kiosks on the ground, the blue ones are up poles, so you get some idea of, you could fit quite a few in North Epping. Yeah.
Does anyone have a question for Joshi?
We'll try and keep the answers a little bit shorter so we've got time to fit everyone in.
Hi, all, and Dusan in particular. Electricity runs downhill, it's a given. To a transformer, it's very high voltage, and at the moment there's no technology to shove by rooftop volts and amps back up to a transformer. It just doesn't work that way. As far as I understand. Now the last power outage we had was a transformer upgrade. That's an outage. Will a local battery, a community battery, prevent those sorts of outages, or do you have to cut it off to upgrade a transformer?
In terms of physics, electricity
doesn't care about the conductors and which way it flows, but how the whole system. I think that you hit the nail on the head there when you said it flows, the electricity flows sort of downhill, because the best analogy for electricity is water. If you have a big sort of dam which serves the water, and all of that water is kind of going downhill to all of our houses, and then when it comes to our house, it's a very small pipe. So now the problem that our house is and that pipe is designed for a certain water pipe, is designed for a certain amount of water consumption that we were predicted to have over the life of our house. Now, if we try to push that water both ways, use it and at the same time generate some of our sort of rainwater from our roofs, right? And sort of try to push that back to someone in the city, that sort of creates a whole confusion in that sort of water distribution system in this analogy. It is very similar with electricity. Unfortunately, the grid that we have is going to be, is sort of not well equipped to deal with this local generation. And in the morning, it's sort of, when the sun is not high up, it pumps all the power to the communities, and in midday, the communities pump back to the city, and then so it goes back, sort of a seesaw. It's not well equipped. There's two solutions. One is upgrade the whole grid. The other one is install community batteries so that we don't have that problem on the larger scale. Everything's sort of contained within communities. And sorry, what was the second question?
So it only flows back to the battery. It's not trying to push it up through a transformer and back. If the transformer needs to be serviced, does the local battery also have to go out, because you can't work on the transformer if it's live?
Well, this is an excellent question, and it would be brilliant challenge for a good electrical design engineer to do that. It depends how it's implemented. But if you say that the battery is there to support the local community during, for example, an outage, that implies that that battery can withstand the load of the community for some time, especially if that community is actually generating and not consuming power. So if it can do that, then for sure, maybe it cannot cover for the entire period of the replacement of the transformer, but at least for some of that period, so that our beer doesn't go hot.
So the transformer can be isolated from the community battery, so it keeps feeding into all the houses anyway.
It could potentially do that. What I would do if I was running that particular project of replacement of a transformer, I would bring a temporary transformer, so sort of like a surgery bypass, if you will. I would do that so that the community doesn't suffer because I have to upgrade an asset. That's how I would do it.
Just one supplementary question, I'm sorry. If that were the situation, or on community battery only, do only people who've signed up for it get that power and the rest of them get cut off? Or is that not technically feasible anyway?
I think that comes to, probably that's a bit more Jerome sort of question, but I would just love to target specifically sort of who benefits if only 250 households. So I think that my answer would be that everyone benefits, but some may benefit a bit earlier than others. I think that what happened with the solar industry, back in the day when pretty much there was no solar, German government poured these enormous subsidies into the solar market, and then it sort of started overspilling into the rest of the European market. And because of that, sort of started spilling over back to the US market, which sort of initially took that technology but forgot about it, everywhere in the world. And in a way, we all sort of owe a little bit of debt to those initial investments made by the German government in solar technology. They started pushing that technology so that it became viable. Nowadays, back then when they started, it was completely disastrous. Like, it was so expensive. I remember when I was just starting off as a young engineer, cost of 1 kilowatt of solar was about 10,000 euros back then. It was just phenomenal. Now it's sort of less than 500. I think that the same thing, what I would love to see as an outcome from this project, is that this project runs successful, the model is there, how everyone gets benefits is there, the project is run well, it's operated well, and then it just sort of makes sense for everyone not to install their own garage batteries, because in my opinion, that's a suboptimal solution. It will be best if accumulated that money, invested in the battery bank, if you will, at the local transformer, so that, well, you know, it's cheaper to buy one big Coca-Cola per litre than 4 little ones. So it's the same sort of economies of scale principle that's applied here.
Look, unfortunately, we're very early on from our transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. We've wasted 10 years as a nation. The former government either didn't believe in it or chose not to do it. This is the first of many community batteries that will be installed across the nation, and hopefully will create an industry and create a model. The initial one, as Dusan said, will be government funded, and hopefully through this process, if we can prove this one to be very successful, it'll be something that communities can fund, or even the energy providers can fund themselves, noting that, you know, Dusan's comments, it's cheaper to sometimes install a battery locally than it is to upgrade the transmission. So, you know, this is a start. The bigger the battery, the more households that can be serviced. But for this $200 million allocation, we're going with those four-wheel drive size batteries, and hopefully that gets the program going. Also, as we move along, battery production across the world will come down significantly. Yeah, we're seeing that, you know, with the electrification of vehicles and transport, batteries are becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper the more they're produced, and that'll be the case here in when it comes to energy storage at home or in the community.
Thanks. We have another question over so we've got it.
Is it on? Yeah. Jerome, how do we access this battery? Like, as a local resident, will there be a criteria, or how do you see 250 people getting access to this battery?
Yeah, I think we'll be oversubscribed, to be honest, and that'll be a good problem to have for the government and for these transmission providers to do that. I think absolutely, if there was one in North Ryde where I live, I would definitely sign up to it as well. I think those details are to be sorted out, but my understanding is that Ausgrid will work with the retailers. The retailers will have an option for people to have solar to, as I said, pay that $1 or $2 a month account management fee to have the software capability to be signed into the system and to sign up. That's my understanding of how they work elsewhere. That's how Ausgrid are running their trial down at Bankstown. So it'll be through your energy retailer, through an agreement with Ausgrid, signed with, and also Ausgrid with the federal government.
Do you have to have a solar panel to be part of it? What if you don't have a solar panel?
No, you don't. So the way that the Minister explained it at our forum down at Epping was that those who don't have, the great thing about these, and Dusan said, is that it can benefit the community as well. It doesn't just benefit those who provide power to the battery, it can benefit the whole community, particularly those who don't have solar panels or just can't get them. They're either renters or they live in an apartment. So I think it's usually calibrated so that those, if there's excess power not used by those who have solar panels, this is one format, calibration, that if there's, you know, excess power at the end of the evening, then those who don't have solar panels can access that power if they've signed up. That's my understanding of one model of how it works. But the beauty about these batteries and the technology we have nowadays to track power generation and usage, as I said, I can just pull out my app and see how much excess power I've generated. The beauty of the technology advances is that you know, different models can be used That's to be determined, but hopefully one that benefits those who have solar and those who can't get solar would be ideal.
Thanks, Thank you. We've got lots of questions to get through.
Given the discussion that's already been raised about this distribution of transformers and the notion that electricity flows downhill under potential, are we really talking about a community battery for North Epping, or a community battery for a more localised cluster of homes within North Epping? I'd like clarification on that. And is there a fundamental restriction that the batteries will have to be downstream in terms of the distribution network of one or more of the actual transformers?
I'm not as qualified as Disha here, so I might pass this on to him.
I can start because the question, the answer has both technical and regulatory aspects to it. The technical aspect is, once you sort of start looking at where is the best place, most techno-economic place to put the battery in, starting from, is it going to be the garage? Is it going to be the sort of low voltage side of the local transformer? Is it going to be in the big sort of substation, which sort of steps down the transmission into the local sort of wooden poles and distribution? Is it going to be just at the power station, so when their output goes up and down, that we can put it? The analysis is very clear. This is that having it at a local transformer is the most techno-economical. It's the best place to have a battery. Now, this is what I assume this project will do, is it will put a battery on the low voltage side of a local transformer, which might mean one of those red or blue dots. Is that red or blue? Depending on how people vote.
No, it's not actually.
We're not in the USA. But this is, so I think that having one of those batteries, even if it's, like if I live in a community where there's a battery coming in, even if it's not, even if sort of it's not on the transformer that I'm supplied from, I think that I'm going to be benefiting indirectly from it. There's going to be massive lessons learned there. The community will know how to sort of integrate both sort of mentally and physically with that battery.
I understand where you're coming from with that sort of technical proposition, but most of us here are retail purchasers of electricity through one of the many retailers that barrage us every other month with a scheme that's better than the last one. And one of the critical issues in comparing proposed plans is the feed-in tariff, which has been kicked all over the place in recent years, and which for many of us is a joke. So I'm wondering where some of the figures come from in terms of the advantages of the battery. But from a technological point of view, I think it's superb. I understand some of this stuff. But from a user point of view, as someone who suffers the unsolicited calls every other month about changing my energy plan and provider, how does it kick in, given that it's of limited capacity? Obviously it has to be, it's a demonstration. How does it actually affect my electricity bill?
Yeah, so the trial, Ausgrid priced the trial in Bankstown at between $50 to $250 a year, depending on the usage of the battery. I would be hopeful that these batteries are geared towards reducing emissions and reducing power prices. So I would hope it'd be towards the top end of that range. The delivery of the sign-up mechanism, as I mentioned earlier, will be something that will be announced as the community batteries come on board.
Through retailers?
Through retailers, yep.
Okay, we've got a question over here.
Yeah, first of all, I think it's a great initiative. However, it sounds like this battery, community battery, is charged by the excess power generated by each household, one each for the household which has the solar panels. So before EV, we've got, okay, so our excess of solar panel is much less after we got EV. Therefore, I'm just wondering, is there an initiative to promote more solar panels to be installed? Because this goes hand in hand with the battery, otherwise no one will be having enough excess power to charge it.
Yeah, this is an area which government can make a lot of difference in, encourage people to get solar.
Is that being budgeted on?
Sorry?
Is there anything in the budget?
No, so our budget commitments were to rewiring the nation, upgrading the transmission, 85 solar banks, which may be an opportunity for people instead of getting solar, just as we have economies of scale with community batteries, there are economies of scale with solar banks as well, and that's to be rolled out, 85 across the country, where people can, rather than getting $5,000 installed on their home, can pay $1,000 and have the same electricity generation, but in a solar bank out in the region. So that's been budgeted for, 85 solar banks to be installed across the country. My understanding is that the majority of solar users that don't have a battery generate more power than they use. That's the way that this model works until such time, and as the community becomes aware of this program, hopefully they'll encourage more people to get solar and renewable on their home to top up the battery. I don't think filling up the battery with excess power storage will be an issue. That's my understanding of how solar's used, and the fact that most people aren't home during the day. For those that are, even I was at home most of the day today. I plugged in my car when I got home for about 2 hours, still generated 15 kilowatt hours more than I used. So I think there'll be plenty of excess storage that'll be stored into the battery rather than going back into the grid and wasted. If we store it in the battery, at least we can use it again.
Sorry. Just one last question on the 250 notion of 250 households when it comes to importing and exporting from the battery. Just to clarify, is that 250 load of people coming in, or is it, and then with those with excess solar power coming to the battery, and then you can actually offload it to more people?
Yeah, so the battery has enough power to power the 250 households. Whether there are limits to how many people sign up to the program, I don't think it'll be limited to 250 accounts. But the power held within the battery that size can power 250 homes. So that's the limits of how many people can sign up and not sign up. We'll see by once those details have been worked out. But the size of the battery, and I've got it in some notes somewhere, and I'll find them. In terms of its storage capacity, is enough to power 250 households.
Okay, because that's slightly different to the notion that only 250
Yes.
people can
Yes.
250 households for how long?
It's enough to power 250 households. That's the information that I've got. Yeah.
So you have the lights on for a minute and then they go out.
On standard usage, I don't think standard usage or approximate usage of how much power an average household uses. The size of that battery can power about 250 households.
Yeah, all I was thinking of, like in summer you've got the air cons going on and all this sort of stuff. And fridges, whatever, you use them like that.
And then some households use significant amount of power, some households don't. So yeah, it's an average. That size typically would power 250 homes for the evening.
Okay, we've got to wrap it up by 9. That's when Steve has to go.
There's one here too, Joe.
Okay, so I've got Peter here and I've got Bill here.
Question to Dusan, I think, and perhaps Jerome. I'm struggling a little bit with the mechanism here. We've got a utility, we've got Osprey, saves some TUOS charges, saves other expenditure, capital expenditure. I can't see the connect between that and the community battery. As the previous questioner said, the money they give back is laughable. If they're going to charge a fee to have you enrolled to feed your power back in, you'll end up actually paying them to do it. I mean, it just, to me, I can't see the economics at the moment as a generator of solar power, because what I get back from the excess cent and do is nothing. I may as well not do it.
I don't know what the commercial model will be. I'm not involved in the project, so I can't talk about that. But what I can say is what are the potential benefits, and to sort of also use your question, madam, was how now that we have sort of more and more EVs, are we going to use all of that power before it gets to the battery, etc.? How are we going to benefit? One of the benefits for additional solar on roof is that it will be permitted to be installed. There is something, as everything in life, there is too much of everything, even too much of good things. A certain portion of the grid can hold only a certain amount of solar. And if you sort of push through that, as some communities in Queensland have, they're either severely curtailed, so when they most need power, they are not allowed to export anything, or additional households cannot put solar on their roof. Having a battery there as a local sort of sink off all of that renewable power will enable more people to install more and more solar. That is where increased renewable contribution comes in. One of the problems with the grid that we have at the moment, and that's what I was talking about, when you're looking at your bill, you have that sort of trio of prices that you're paying. You're paying for a generator who generates somewhere, probably in the Hunter Valley here. They generate brown electrons. You have transmission grid, you have the retailer, you have to pay all three of them. Right now, how the feed-in tariff works is that they don't care where that little green electron is being generated. They charge you for the whole transmission fee. So maybe a green electron is coming from Victoria, maybe it's coming from your neighbor next door, but you're paying the full transmission charge, even though that electron doesn't actually get to the transmission line. I believe that these sort of projects would be able to ask all of those questions to the designers, technical and financial designers of these projects, and that they would change what I was talking about earlier, tune the regulation so it becomes more modern and starts answering all of those key questions.
So we've got, I think, the big question here and one up there.
Just the batteries store 500 kilowatt hours, and that is typically enough for 250 households. So that's what the capacity of. They're $500,000 each.
So just a quick one.
How long do they?
I think we have that question.
We've got one.
So just wondering how much each of these batteries is going to cost and what is the lifetime of it?
They're $500,000 each. $500,000 each.
And the lifespan?
Life cycle, I'm not sure, to be honest. I know that solar panels and batteries usually have a 15 to 20 year guarantee period, but I'm not sure of the life cycle of a commercial battery like this, but I'm happy to get back to you on that one.
So
Do you know? Do you?
So there's many components in a battery, but there's sort of all of the conversion equipment, and then there's the physical batteries that actually store the electrons. The batteries last between 10 and 15 years usually. It depends on how severely how much we push them to the limit. All of the conversion equipment lasts a bit longer. How I would set up this project is that the money that this project earns is there's always a sink fund which sort of repays for the future replacement of batteries, replacement in 15 years of the conversion equipment, so that it essentially works perpetually.
So for North Epping, we get one for 250 homes, and anything above that, it has to be self-funded somehow.
Well, the commitment was to install one 500 kilowatt hour battery in North Epping. I said the number, only about a third of the 400 batteries have been promised to locations. There'll be processes established through ARENA, through a grants process for communities to apply for more. They haven't been determined where they're going to go, and I'll give those exact numbers to you in a second. Yeah, there's more to be installed. There's 400 that have been committed to out of the $200 million. There's 151 lower house electorates, so that's 1.8 or 1.9 per electorate, but there are some electorates that may have more. Why I recommended North Epping to the then Shadow Minister was that I know that this is a community that will make very good use of this battery, thereby increasing our argument to perhaps get another one in another part of the electorate.
I think we've got one last question and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Thank you very much. My name is Lee. Just a follow on from our friend over here. I want to ask a question about the flexibility, if you're one of the 250 people that sign on to this, of how you use what is fed back in. For instance, the typical retail provider charges you off-peak times about 25 cents a kilowatt hour, shoulder period about 40 cents a kilowatt hour, and peak about 65 cents a kilowatt hour. But if you feed back in from your solar system 5 cents a kilowatt, doesn't matter when it is. Would you be able to, if you signed up to it, choose to say, I will draw on the community battery during the peak times so that you could save the most? So the question is about the flexibility of the way it's used.
I think the delivery is for it to go back at peak times, so when solar is not being generated. So, and it will just, my understanding is that it will get to capacity through all the excess, and then it will just feed back in, based on the smart technology that most solar systems have.
So it would be running in tandem with whatever retailer you have at the same time. So it doesn't replace them, but you could say, all right, I'll switch off from the retailer at peak and I'll take it from the community battery.
I think the battery exhausts almost every day, and then it tops up again the next day. That's my understanding of how a battery of this size is used. Bigger batteries may not exhaust in that peak period, but they're designed so that the excess power that's generated during the day, stored locally, and you use it again at night.
And then you go back to the grid, to the normal retail.
If the battery is depleted, you then go from the grid. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.